Hi everyone, it's Lynn Dion from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to create a couple of fun interactive cards, and we're going to be using a brand new die set from Lawn Fawn. This is part of the Build-A-Drink series, and this one is the Rootbeer add-on. But I also want to let you know that I have done a couple other videos with this Build-A-Drink series. I did a shaker card, and I also used the cocktail add-on. So you might want to check those out. I will link those below the video for you, and they're also linked on my blog. Let's get started by creating our card base. This cardstock measures 5.5 by 11 inches, and I'm going to score it at 5.5 inches, so right at the halfway point. I'm going to flip it over and score it again on one side at 2 3/4 inch. So we'll have two score lines at 2 3/4 and 5.5. Now let's go ahead and do that second one. And I'm using some Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. So we'll score it at 5.5, flip that over and score it again at 2 3/4 inch. So once we have those all set, I went ahead and folded those. So what you're going to do is fold at the 5.5 inch mark, and then you're going to fold it back on itself at the 2 3/4 inch mark. Let's do that again. We're folding it in half and then folding it back on itself, right on those two score lines that we created. So that gives us our little Z fold. Now I placed my cardstock onto my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station, and I've got my paint splatter stencil from Lawn Fawn, and this is going to create kind of like a splash look of the beer and the root beer on the back of our card. So I did decide to add a little bit of post-it tape right along that edge, right along the score line. I was worried that adding my ink, I might go over the edge of the stencil, but I didn't. So later on you'll see that I just removed that tape. I didn't need that tape. But if you are worried about that, you can add a little bit of a mask there. And then I'm starting to add some ink. And this is the scattered straw. I've got a small blending brush, and I'm going to add that scattered straw all over this stencil. And I've placed it in the upper right-hand corner because we are going to cover this entire panel. So I'm going to be moving this stencil around. And then I'm coming in with some fossilized amber and just adding a little bit of it here and there, just for a little bit of a shadowing, a little bit of shading. I'm going to then blend that in with that small brush, and I'm going to kind of clean off that brush if I need to. I can just rub it onto a piece of paper towel or a microfiber towel. So now that we have that done, you can see now I'm going to move that stencil around, and I'm using those magnets to hold everything down. We'll go back to the scattered straw, and then we'll add a little bit of that fossilized amber again, just for a little bit of shadowing. And then you see that I'm going to clean that brush off if I need to. I can take off any excess ink. Here's where I realized I don't need that mask, and I do want to do this entire panel. So I'm just going to be careful not to go along those straight edges on the sides of the stencil, and just make sure I stay in the center of the stencil here. And that's pretty easy to do because you have a lot of space between those spatters and the edge of the stencil. But if you are worried about that, again, you can just add a mask. And now I've filled in the entire panel, and I'm just using that stencil just to fill in any little areas that I missed. So now that we have that completely stenciled, let's set that one aside to dry, and let's grab this second one. So I'm going to use the same exact technique. We're going to grab two different colors of ink. Now for that first one, I used the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide inks. And for this one, I'm going to use a combination. I've got the Distress Oxide Antique Linen, and then I've got the Hero Hues Reactive ink in Rootbeer, which is perfect for our Rootbeer card. So I'm really happy about that color because it actually turned out so beautiful. So I'm adding the antique linen first, Again, I am using a smaller brush just to get into some of these smaller areas. And then I'm going to come in with the root beer. And again, I'm just adding a little bit here and there for a little bit of shadowing. And then what we'll do is, again, we can clean off the brush as we go along and start to blend that out. So I'm just going to do some nice blending on these. We can remove that stencil and you can see how really cool that looks. I love how that looks. So now I'm going to finish off the rest of this panel. And we have our 2 card bases complete with the stenciling. So once those were done, let's grab this really fun new Lawn Fawn Build-A-Drink root beer add-on die set. And this is fantastic. You get the little mug, and then that piece there is for the liquid. And you can have the liquid at any height you want in your cup. So that die will cut the liquid. That little die will cut the little bubbles. That is for whipped cream, and this one is for the foam at the top of our mug. We're going to set aside the bubbles, the whipped cream, and that little line for the liquid. And we're going to just use this little mug and the background and our foam. So let's go back to those same 2 inks, the scattered straw and the fossilized amber. I'm going to put the scattered straw all over this background. This is for the liquid. This is what's going to show through our glass. And then for the foam, I'm just adding a little tiny hint of that color on the foam. And there's some little slots there. That would be so if you wanted to tuck in a little straw or a cherry or something for your root beer float, you could easily do that. I'm just going to pull back those little slots a little bit and add a little bit of color in there. Then I added the fossilized amber down towards the bottom of this panel, again for a little bit of shading. I've got some water that I've sprayed onto my glass medium mat using my distress sprayer, and I'm going to spatter this, and that'll give us that look of bubbles. But you could certainly use that dye that's included with the set to create your bubbles as well. You can die cut that once, twice, as many times as you want on this little panel to create a whole bunch of bubbles. But I'm going to use this spattering technique for my bubbles, and later on we'll be adding a few little clear gems that will really enhance that bubbly look. So now I've gone back to the antique linen and the root beer, and we're going to add that, and again adding that darker shadowing down towards the bottom. I'm going back to the antique linen just to get a little bit better blending. And you can see my fingerprints were showing, so I just grabbed a little piece of scrap paper towel just to hold that down while I finished adding some color. Back to the antique linen, and I'm going to do the same thing we did before, just add a little bit of shadowing around that foam. I've got that same paintbrush, and I'm going to spatter this with a little bit of water. And on this one, the bubbles show up a little bit more because we're dealing with a darker color. I've got my Zig Clean Color Real Brush Pen in the Haze Blue, and I'm just adding a little bit of a tint to this glass. I'll use that Zig Blender pen to blend that out. Once that was done, we can go ahead and add the liquid behind the glass. I'm using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. You want to make sure that darker shadow is down towards the bottom, and I'll glue these 2 together. And look how cool this is. I really love how this looks. It's so fun. We can go ahead and add the foam to the top of our little mug. And again, I'm going back to that same glue, and I'll add a little bit of glue to the back of the glass as well. And look at this. Isn't this so fun? So now let's do the same thing for the root beer. So for our little root beer float, let's go ahead and attach that background. I'm just blending out that haze blue just a little bit better, and then we'll pop the foam in place. Now I've got two pieces of cardstock. These are both from Hero Arts. This one is the mustard color, and I'm cutting these down to 3¼ by 4½ inches. And this one is called Woodland. So I'll cut that to the same size. I'm using my Tim Holtz paper trimmer to trim those down. Now I decided to add a layer of wood grain cardstock to the top of these. And I've got my Gnome paper pad from Art Impressions. These are some really pretty 6x6 papers, and they're double-sided. And I'll cut this down to 3 inches by 4¼ inches. And we need 2 of these. So again, 3 inches by 4¼ and that'll sit right on top of our solid cardstock. So I'm going to grab some coordinating inks here. I've got the Rootbeer, and I'm going to go all the way around the edges of this just to frame this and give it a little bit more of a rustic look. And that really just kind of adds another layer to our layered card. We're going to add one more layer as well. We're going to add some really pretty plaids to this just to tie everything together. You see that'll sit right on top of that Woodlands cardstock. I'm going to glue that in place. I like to use the glue because it gives me a little time to slide everything around, make sure I have it positioned nicely in the center. And then let's go ahead and glue these two together as well. But first we're going to add a little bit of that fossilized amber around the edges of this one. And once that was done, we can go ahead and glue these two together as well. Now I've got the Tim Holtz Sizzix Thinlits Alphanumeric lowercase. And I've grabbed the letters to spell out the word berry. And I've grabbed that long piece as well, which I believe is the letter L. And I'm going to just cut that down. We're going to have a little hyphen between the B-E-E-R and the Y. So what I'm going to do is die cut all of these using the leftover papers that I had from the mustard and the woodland cardstock. And we're going to die cut that word. And then again, we'll be cutting down this long piece. First, we can go ahead and pop up our little beer mug. I've got some 3D foam tape. That's going to give it some nice dimension. I added a few little pieces around the handle on the mug as well, just so this sits up nicely as it goes through the mail. I'm going to center the mug on this panel. And then we'll go ahead and add our letters. And I kind of want them to wrap around the bottom of the mug, sort of the shape of the bottom of the mug. So I'm going to put the Y and the B up a little bit higher. And they're a little bit longer as well, so this worked out perfectly. Now, any of your alphabet sets would work just fine here. I just happened to grab this one. I thought it was really cute. I like the shape of the letters, but again, any of your alphabet dies would be great. And I'm just positioning these out, and that long piece, we're just going to cut that down. And we'll use that as our little hyphen in between these letters. So I'm going to quickly glue those down. Now, if you want more dimension on these, you could add several of these, glue these together, and make a nice thick embellishment. But because I had popped up the beer, I thought that gave us enough dimension. You could also add some glitter. Use your Wink of Stella glitter pen and add some glitter to these. So whatever you want to do, you could use that same plaid paper to do your letters. We're going to be grabbing some plaid for our background. So just kind of have fun with that. These are the two plaids that I was talking about, and they're just so cute. These are from the Doodlebug Design 6x6 paper pad, and this is called Pumpkin Spice, and I really love this one. I've used this in other videos, but it's just got some really masculine plaids in it, or just some pretty fun plaids. And I'm going to use these to layer up the card a little bit more. Now, I did cut those plaid papers down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. But a little bit later on, you'll see that I'm going to cut those down just a little bit. I thought the plaid was a little bit more prominent than I wanted it to be, so I will be cutting that down just slightly. Here's where I've grabbed my paper trimmer, and I'm going to take off about 1/16 of an inch all the way around. Now you could certainly leave it the way we originally cut it, but again, I thought I liked it a little bit better when the border was a little bit smaller. So I'll cut both of those down, and then for the sentiment, I've got "Have a Happy Birthday." And this is from the Berry Special Lawn Fawn stamp set. There's also coordinating dies for that. And I'm going to actually just cut this sentiment in half. I've got the "Have a," and then in the upper left-hand corner, and then the "Happy Birthday" in that lower right-hand corner. For my card, I'm just going to put a little bit of Tombow Mono tape in there just to hold that down while I do my stamping, and we'll easily remove that once we are done. So I'm just temporarily holding that closed, and then I'm going to position those stamps. And for this first one, I'm going to use the Rootbeer because it's a nice dark ink. So I'm going to use that Rootbeer ink up those stamps, and go ahead and stamp this. Now you could certainly add a layer here. You pop up your sentiments using some solid cardstock and some white embossing powder. That would be really cute as well. But I decided to stamp these directly onto the card, and for this one I used the VersaFine Onyx black ink. Now you do want to make sure you remove that adhesive pretty quickly. If it stays on too long, it will stay down permanently. So I used it as a temporary adhesive, and I'm going to remove that using my adhesive eraser. And all of the products I'm using today are listed and linked down below, as well as on my blog. Now let's go ahead and find the center point of this panel. So I'm marking that with a pencil. I've got it on my glass media mat. I'm finding that center, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. Now I want to put adhesive on the left side of this beer mug panel. So I'm using my Miss T ruler, and I'm lining that up at those pencil marks. And I'm going to leave that there so I know exactly where to put my glue. You could certainly just draw a pencil line down the back. I just found this really simple, just to line up my Miss T ruler and just apply that glue to just the one side. Now I can go ahead and attach that to the card. And again, I'm using that glue so that I can move this around if I need to. I can slide it around just a little bit. So we only have glue on that left-hand side. And here you'll see that I'm just going to position that just a little bit if I need to. And then I'll do the same thing for this other one. So I've got that Miss T ruler right on the center, right where those pencil marks are. And then let's go ahead and add this one to our Rootbeer card. So now that we have both of those all set, I thought what was showing on the back side of our paper, on the back side of the plaid, I didn't really like what was there for this particular card. Maybe on another card it would be cute. So I cut another piece of that plaid paper, and I'm just going to cover that back panel. And that was cut down to size. So this measures 1 3/4 by 4 3/4. And that will fit perfectly on that little space on the back. And it also thickens things up a little bit as well. And I just think that finishes this off nicely. But if you are going to leave that double-sided paper showing, you want to make sure you have it going in the right direction. So you do want to make sure you check that before you place your layers together. So let's go ahead and position that down. And we'll do the same thing for this one. Next, I've got some Hero Hues enamel dots. These are the clear ones. And I'm going to just add 3 of these to the front of my little beer mug. And that, again, is going to enhance that look of bubbles. And these are sticky back, so they're really easy just to position down. And I'm using my Cricut weeding tool just to pick those up. So let's take a closer look at the finished card and look at that fun background. And you could certainly sign right back there. You could add another layer of cardstock back there if you wanted to sign or put an additional sentiment. But I just thought these were so much fun. These are great for men or women. Really fun and easy to do. I love creating those stencil backgrounds. That was fun. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Keep in mind all the products I've used today are listed and linked down below for you. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.